Nicole Huntsman from moderncosmic.com. Thanks for joining me on our little journey through the planets and our synastry series, these house overlays. This video is for those of you who'd like to learn about Saturn. Now, Saturn is, when it comes to love and romance, Saturn, it can be a little bit of a restrictor, okay? But it also can be the planet that adds permanence and longevity and commitment to a relationship. So let's talk about some keywords for Saturn. So Saturn is restriction. That's kind of my very favorite, keyword that I apply to Saturn. Restriction, obligation, duty. It's the part of in our psyche, in our personality, it's the part of you that's the inner grown-up. Okay. Also, if you've ever heard that expression that if someone is Saturnine, it means they've got a sort of a moody, gloomy personality. They like to keep to themselves. Okay. There's if you think of like House from the TV show Dr. House, like that's an example of someone who's quite Saturnine. There's a bit of cynicism and skepticism because Saturn also has to do with the known world, and so there's show me and then I'll believe you kind of thing happening with Saturn. It's very, very it's very realistic, and that's what makes Saturn a little cynical. So it's the part of us that's a little cynical. Now, if you understand Saturn from a astronomical perspective, this was until we were able to see Uranus and Neptune, and Pluto. Saturn was the edge of our known solar system as far as what we could see with instrumentation we had. So it traditionally represents the bounds. It's the bounds of our solar system. It represents the outer limits, okay? So if you think of it that way, it makes sense that in our personality it would apply to rules and it would apply to our boundaries, etc., etc. With relationships. Now, Saturn is important though because it does commitment. When you're committed to someone, that means that you have some rules in place. That means that you're saying, okay, we're together. And for you, if your version of commitment means we don't sleep around with other people, or if your version of commitment is we get married before we sleep together, whatever it is, that's Saturn, okay? You've got to look at first both people's individual birth charts and the Saturn in their birth charts. If the Saturn in the birth chart is poorly afflicted, so meaning if you've got Saturn squaring your sun or your moon, even Mercury, Venus, and Mars, those personal planets, it's going to add a little bit of a Saturn personality, a little more of Saturn to your personality rather. Also, if you have Capricorn on any of those planets, sun, moon, and then, of course, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Mercury, Venus, Mars. Or if you've got your planets in the 10th house, okay? That tells us you're going to have a personality that's naturally more in tune with Saturn and what it means to be Saturnine, okay? There's an ambition to Saturn. Saturn rules the 10th house of status, achievement, accomplishment. So if you've got a strong Saturn in your birth chart, that means more than likely you will be attracted to someone who complements that, okay? Or is like the complete opposite. Depends on the rest of your chart, of course, but understand both people's Saturn placements. If their Saturn is poorly afflicted in their chart, though, that means they have some inner fears related to their expression of their Saturn, okay? They could either be highly ambitious and someone who's really focused on doing things the right way, and they're afraid of doing things the wrong way and being seen in a light that's less than positive, like the reputation looks, worried about their reputation. They could also be someone who keeps themselves. There can be an introversion with someone who has a strong Saturn. And there can be a critical kind of nature to someone with a skepticism or skeptical nature, or a sarcastic nature, or someone who, if it's applying to their Venus, their moon, whether it's by planetary place or zodiac, whether it's by planetary placement, meaning it's in Capricorn, or even Aquarius, because that's traditionally was ruled by Saturn. So I should have mentioned that, sorry. So also, if you've got strong 11th house, or if you've got strong Aquarius, those are also Capricorn or Saturn. It's a kind of a different Saturn though. When I think of Aquarius Saturn, I think of a scientist. Just bear with me. I think of someone who has a high degree of skepticism. It's like they're open-minded in a certain way, but if it's like they have an eccentric, the way their mind works is quite eccentric. They're open to a lot of different ideas, but there's still this initial skepticism. Whereas when I think of Capricorn, that also applies for Capricorn, but Capricorn to me is more interested in kind of this world and building in this world, whereas Saturn is kind of, or Aquarius is more interested sort of in the cosmic world. So at any rate, that's a side note. Okay, let's go ahead though and talk about how you will affect your partner just by knowing where your Saturn falls. So this is going to show how you bring out your partner's, maybe your Saturn falls in a place where they don't naturally have a strong sense of personal responsibility, or they're kind of flaky in this area, or maybe they just haven't developed it yet, maybe they're quite immature. Let's say it's in the house of communication, you know. It could be something where your Saturn falls in their house of communication and they suddenly feel like they need to step up their communication game. You know, they start reading more, they feel like they've got to keep up to date on books and movies and, you know, this kind of thing. Okay, so we'll go through all the houses and make this make sense. But first of all, you need to have your birth chart, partner's birth chart. You need to do a little synastry chart. And when you do the synastry overlay, you just, it's very simple. Just, you know, look at where the glyph for Saturn, look at the house that it lands in. When you overlay the two charts, just look at where it lands in your partner's chart and then go to the video and watch that portion, and then you'll have all the secrets. And also, by the way, Saturn, if it is healthy and happy in, let's say, your birth chart or your partner's birth chart, but then in the synastry, if it's making hard aspects, Saturn is glue. So not only house overlays, but those aspects with Saturn will give a certain sense of containment or restriction or glue, like where it can almost, depending on the rest of the chart, if you've got a strong Pluto in the chart, then it can almost be obsessive. But in a healthy relationship, it can help keep the two of you together, and it can rein you in. You can have someone who has a very crazy, wild Mars, let's say. I have a client like this, and he has a partner he's really in love with, and she's got Saturn she's like a quadruple Capricorn, but then she also has all this Saturn making all these aspects to his wild and crazy Mars, which is the wild part in his chart. And so she's like the rein, she's the bridle on his passion, and she's the only woman that he really wants to be committed to. So, okay, so you really got to look at the whole big picture. Okay, anyway, on to the house overlays. Saturn in the first house. So if your Saturn falls in your partner's first house, the way I want you to think about this is you've got to think about the fact that your Saturn, the zodiac sign placement and how it's aspected in your chart, but at least the zodiac placement is going to reflect your partner's first house, right? So if you have your Saturn in Leo, let's say, that means that your Saturn falls into your partner where they have Leo in their chart. So in the first house, this first house has to do with your partner's personality and their identity to a certain extent. This means that they are going to do things in such a way and be in such a way that reflects your style of responsibility, okay? So it's funny because it's your Saturn, and so there is this sense on your partner's behalf, they're going to feel like they have to sort of keep things light, keep things happy. And if you've got a partner who's got a nice strong Jupiter in their chart, maybe Jupiter to the sun or the moon or a lot of Sag, then they can do that for you. But if you don't, then you're going to have a partner that might become sort of depressed, or the relationship can feel sort of heavy. They can feel like you judge them, that you're too critical of the way that they are, okay? That's on the shadow side. That's if it's afflicted. Also look at, the interaspects between the two charts. If your Saturn is also like squaring their sun or something, or then there's really this sense of duty and obligation being an undercurrent in the relationship. Okay, it could even be on top of the water, like very surface dynamic in the relationship. You can see this. You see Saturn in the first house and the seventh house, any of the angular houses, the fourth or the 10th even, in important relationships, because there is a need to, you guys are coming together to teach each other something important, and it's a growth type of an inner aspect, and it's about you will be bringing out in your partner their sort of grown-up side of themselves, a little bit more of a serious side of who they are. And also the biggest thing I see with Saturn in the first house is just be careful that you aren't overly critical of your partner, just their way of being. It's funny because Saturn, sometimes it's like it's not like you on purpose would be critical of them, but it's just they would sense that how they are is not the way that they should be according to you. That can happen. So Hopefully that's not the case. Try your best. If if your Saturn is in that first house, or if your partner's Saturn is in your first house, just try your best to use it constructively. If you are giving feedback to someone, do it in a constructive way rather than a critical or a nagging way. Okay. Okay, Saturn in the second house. Second house, this is our house of personal finance and our resources and the things we value. So if it's your Saturn and it's falling into your partner's second house, there's a suggestion that you have this area of your life sort of worked out. It doesn't mean that you have your finances worked out, but there's something about the way that you apply responsibility, ambition, duty, adultness to your life that inspires your partner in a way to feel like financially and that their values are under this sort of structure of safety, okay? You may have the ability to actually help your partner structure their financial situation. There can at times, if it's poorly afflicted, this could be a time where, so if your partner's, or I'm sorry, if your Saturn is poorly afflicted, falls in your partner's second house, there can be issues of you being a drain on their resources even. Perhaps you're someone who has a bunch of debt and then you get together with a partner and they don't have any debt and you've got a poorly afflicted Saturn and it falls in their second house, then might be a drain on their resources. Or perhaps you have a really different value system from your partner, your personal values, what you find, like I always say, when you watch a movie, it's the stuff that makes you cry, that's what you personally value, okay? And perhaps that's very different from your partner and maybe they feel like there's a judgment from you towards what they value, towards their value system. So just, wherever we have Saturn, there's room for growth. I think Saturn's a great planet because it's all about this earthly place. So it's like this down to earth, come to Jesus kind of a planet. When it's in someone's second house, maybe it can be a placement where you can teach your partner about being more responsible with their money, or you can have these discussions about what they personally value. You can bring some responsibility to what they personally value. Maybe they don't have a value system that's very strong. So you could come along and the way we all have things we value. So Saturn kind of shows us a little bit about what those values are. It's different than Venus. It's kind of like the rules that you follow, okay? So you're helping this person crystallize their personal rules and their personal system of, structure, inner responsibility and duty that they have to the world around them. Something else interesting to look at. So with the Saturn when it falls in the first house, look at your Saturn in the synastry chart itself. Does it make any oppositions or squares to your partner's planets, especially their luminaries, the sun and the moon, or their personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, even to their angles. But let's start simple with just the planets. Which planets, which ones, what is it making harsh aspects to? Okay, so let's say it's their Mercury. Let's say your Saturn falls into their second house and it's also squaring their Mercury. Okay, now that's their communication. That's the way that they think. That's what they value. And there's a suggestion that there'd be conversation the two of you would have where there could even be fights, or perhaps a restriction about how you spend your money. You could feel like your partner has some sort of almost this restricting influence on how you spend your money. You feel like you can't tell them what you're spending your money on, okay? And you can do this with any of the planets. So just think of what the planet is and then what it symbolizes, the keywords, keep it really simple. Mars can be, if it's Mars, let's say it's sex, and then the second house is what you value. And then Saturn says the Saturn person is coming along and causing you to question your values relative to sex, okay? If it's Venus, then it's your sort of romantic sensibilities and relationship harmonization. So you're going to be questioning your values on that planet, okay? And so on and so forth. All right. The second house too, remember Saturn, because Saturn has this ability it wants to consolidate, it wants to get rid of extra unnecessary BS. So it is great for helping someone maybe prepare a budget, and this can be a literal budget, financial budget, or it can even be a metaphorical budget for your life. Why are you spending time doing that? That's a waste of your time. You should be doing this instead. So as you can see, that can be high side, can be really helpful to help you grow and stop wasting time on things or resources on things that don't matter, that you don't value. But it can also be, if it's being exercised in an unhealthy way, it can feel very critical. It can feel like the person's nagging you and on your case. So don't be a nag with that Saturn. Saturn in the third house. So this is our house of communication. Okay, you put Saturn there, this can be good. So on the high side, this can help someone to sharpen their critical thinking. You may have the ability with your partner, with your Saturn, to help them improve their logical thinking, okay? And improve their sort of, like I said earlier with the second house even, this idea of getting rid of the superfluous, the extra, sloughing that off and just focusing on what is most important and what is just the facts and just the facts, that kind of thing. Now on the sort of the low function or shadow side, if your partner, or rather if your Saturn is poorly aspected at birth, or if in your inner aspects there are a lot of oppositions and squares, even conjunctions, you've got to really look at these, because this can be one where your partner feels like they can't say what they really think, or a sense that they have to sort of speak to you or communicate to you in a way that is like not necessarily natural for them. It's like high expectations for how they communicate with you. There could be a sense, and if you've got someone who has Mercury, like a Mercury that's poorly afflicted at birth, or someone where intelligence and being seen as someone intelligent is important for them, then this can be really painful for their self-esteem. It could hurt the relationship, and they might just withdraw and pull back into themselves. So you got to look again at the whole chart. You got to look at the whole symphony of all the different moving pieces to really come to a final conclusion with how this plays out. But Saturn, just remember, apply this idea of restriction, getting very real, consolidation, all to communication, okay? It can also limit, because this third house is also this house of movement. It's this house of, local, actual, it's like driving your car, when you move to a new place, it's brothers and sisters, so think of kids playing, and there's a lot of movement, okay? It's Gemini. So Saturn here, you may feel a sense of dampening in that area, like, or your partner rather. Your Saturn may kind of cause them to feel like they need to be more responsible in the area of busyness. So another thing you could be very helpful with helping someone, if you're with someone who is a little frenetic, you could have the ability to sort of help them, again, get a little more clear about what they really need to be spending their time doing and getting rid of the activities that aren't as important. Okay. On more of a low functioning side, or sort of a shadow side of Saturn in the third house, there can be issues of your partner feeling, as I said, judged for how they think, relative to the travel. Maybe they feel like they're always busy running errands for you, or they're always busy taking care of all of your stuff, like going and taking care of the laundry at the laundromat, or actually in their day-to-day process of driving around feeling like they're doing errands for you. I mean, you can see this with a boss and an assistant even in their chart, that she or he is on their boss's errand all the time. Saturn also has a heaviness to it. Okay, I would think of all of the sort of the earthiest planets. Saturn to me is the heaviest and the coldest. This has to do with never mind. So it's the coldest. So when you put that in the third house, there can be a sense your partner may feel weighted down, may feel like your conversation is heavy, may feel like you might depress them a little bit remember, this is low functioning, but try not to be so critical of just life in general. They could feel like you complain to them, or you are overly critical or hypercritical of situations in your life, and Debbie Downer kind of a thing happening. So that's the shadow side. You have control over that, but that could be, or the flavor of your conversations could just revolve around topics that are responsibilities and that are adult grown-up topics, and that have to do with work, and that have to do with like not the fun stuff necessarily. And the third house likes things to be more bubbly and fun, and it's like champagne bubbling, Gemini. So try your bestest to if you want to keep the relationship happy. I mean, be yourself, but try to frame it in a way that's a little more constructive and not so pessimistic or critical, without sort of a solution to the problem kind of a thing. All right, Saturn falling into your partner's fourth house. Now, fourth house, this is the house of home, right? It's also a parental house. Saturn is the planet I associate with the father, but it doesn't have to necessarily be the male parent or the parent that assumes that role of the father. It's this idea that's the authoritarian, it's the authority figure, rather, of the parental unit. It's the one that's the boss, okay? You put that in the fourth house, which is the house of the mother, it's the house of home, and there can be this sense that you are trying to have a little bit of control over this person's home life, taking on a parental role, whether you want to call that mother or father, doesn't matter, but it's just kind of the parental role, taking care of this person. And that, perhaps you feel some sense of duty or responsibility to this person's home life. You may have the ability to help them in that area, but it might not be well received. On the other hand, if they have a nice, really strong Saturn in their birth chart, they may like it. They may feel like you're bringing order and structure to their home and to their family life, and that might feel like it's a good fit for them. It might be a natural fit. Depending on, then look at that Saturn, look at your Saturn. How is your Saturn aspecting their planets in their chart, and what is it aspecting, okay? You look at what it's aspecting, that will show you where you are trying to bring order. You're trying to bring discipline to this area. So if it is, for example, their sun, then that's them, the person themselves. You're trying to control them or contain them a little bit. Their role, their identity in the home, what is that? Your presence may give that role form, where maybe it had no form before. Let's say if it makes aspects to a sexual planet, you may bring either, it can be a couple of things. It can be either you are bringing discipline relative to the act of sexuality into the home life, or maybe you're bringing, if there's Pluto involved, maybe you're bringing S&M in. If there is, or it could just be this consistent, Mars is also painful, it can hurt things. And so you could be bringing in hurt. You could be activating these painful things relative to your partner's Mars and where it's located and what it's doing. But you're bringing those, activating that passionate part of them, but in a way that's you're doing that wrong, so just depends. Okay. I need to do another video where we talk about all that, the aspects, because it's a lot of fun. All right. Saturn in the 5th house. This placement is a little tricky. It's one of the tougher ones. 5th house is our house of creativity. It's the house of the child. It's the house of play. Okay. It's our Leo house, the sunshine. Now, Saturn, if you think about our old model where Saturn was the edge of the solar system, and you think about the sun, which is in the center, even though, we are sort of geocentric, but anyway, you get my drift. The sun is really bright and warm, and Saturn is the opposite. It's cold and restrictive. So these two don't go together very well. Your partner, if your Saturn falls in their 5th house, they could feel a little bit like you have high expectations of them, and they feel like they're never good enough. They're never quite... You're just like it can be like a wet blanket thing, okay? Now that is, I know I'm starting out with sort of the bad news. The good news is you can help, just like a parent helps a child. Think of it this way. Your Saturn part of you, the parent part of you, is falling into the house of the divine child. You do have the ability, if you use this in a healthy, constructive way, to help your partner step into their childness, okay? So let's say your partner has creative interests. They may not jive with your idea of what creativity should be, and that's okay. If you can give support to them and help them structure their lives in such a way that they've set aside time for their creativity, this is also our house of sexuality. So Saturn here can cause a damper effect to be happening to the love life, or this sense of restrictions or regulations, or your own fears, your own about letting loose and just having fun and playing, that's going to be projected onto your partner. And it's really this not necessarily conscious thing, okay? Our fears always come from a very unconscious place. They come from a place that we don't always, it's like the demons inside. Saturn would be the demons inside, Saturn and Pluto, actually. So you have to really make a conscious effort that you're supportive of your partners, the times when they want to let loose and play or be creative or self-express, and that you are not criticizing them for how they're doing these things, okay? Be like the parent. Just think of it as, again, it's this sort of parent-child thing. Think of it as it's your job to support and encourage and give them guidance and direction, making it almost more Jupiter-ish, Jupiterian, whatever the word is, to their creative pursuits. Something else interesting to note with this placement. So, as I said, the person who is the house person, you're the Saturn person, the house person may sense and feel like I said earlier, they're not good enough. So there can be a little bit of a cat and mouse interaction happening here, where they feel like they can't quite get all of your attention, or they can't get you to quite fall totally in love with them, or, like they don't have all of you. There's a restriction there, and it directly impacts sort of your affections towards them as just a person. So even if you've got to look at the rest of the chart, that would be in a situation where we've got some inter-aspects between the two charts that are indicating a little bit of a blockage there. Saturn in the 6th house. So 6th house is our Virgo house, and Virgo has to do with service, and Virgo has to do with doing things with a certain technique, doing things sort of the right way or a particular way. If your Saturn falls in your partner's 6th house, then they may have a sense that, well, they may feel like you feel like you owe them some kind of service, okay? And I know you don't want to hear that when you're listening to one of these videos, but because you might not even be doing anything that suggests that, but your partner is going to feel a certain sense of obligation towards you to perform some kind of a duty or to some act of service. It's like it's being required of them, okay? And also with Saturn here, this is this house of techniques and learning how to do something the right way. You might sense that the way you do things, the techniques you use, or your version of organizing things, or your version of even critical thinking, analysis, etc., doesn't fit with your Saturnian partner. Or sorry, I said that backwards. Your partner will feel like like you're judging the way that they do these things, okay? Or that there's something about maybe they feel like you feel like they're flaky, or that they're not perfect enough, okay? This is all these Virgo things, and it can bring out, see, your fears are landing into their Virgo house, and Virgo is very anxietous, so you could bring out their fears as well. So this is definitely not a great placement for Saturn. Now, the way it can be good is you can help bring out, if you've got someone who, let's say your partner is like really irresponsible, and your Saturn falls there, they may suddenly feel like, oh, I need to step it up here, and I do owe a certain obligation of duty to this person. I should be helping them with something. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. You just have to be sure that when they are doing things for you, that you're thanking them and that you're, appreciative of the help. Saturn in the 7th house. 7th house is obviously it's our house of marriage and the descendant. It's an angular house, so you've got the descendant there. So this is the other, the partner. Many times you see Saturn in relationships that are significant, but you got to remember that it's not like somebody has to have their Saturn conjunct your descendant for them to be a potential partner. This could be also even just Saturn making aspects to the ruler of your descendant, or Saturn making aspects to your descendant that will signify you bringing out in your partner that sense of duty and obligation and commitment to the relationship. So that's the high side. On the shadow side, Saturn in this house can bring out someone's fears related to commitment. It can make someone feel restricted or trapped. And if you've got someone with a strong Aquarian or Uranian or fire sign chart, even an air chart, it's going to feel really scary to them, and it's going to feel they'll might run from it. Okay, so you got to keep tabs on that. Remember, Saturn is also about standards, rules. That there's a certain way to do something, and there's a right way, and there's a wrong way. So you put it in the 7th house. Your partner may sense that their way of doing partnership and relationship is being tested frequently. They could feel like, well, I want a relationship to be this way, or I am being your partner in this manner, and you're not approving of the way I'm doing it. Okay, remember that's the low functioning side. On the high functioning end of things, it could be something where it could be a relationship where you have a partner who's a bit of a screw off, and again has not been in a serious committed relationship for a while or something, and then your Saturn falls in their 7th house, and that you're activating the part of them that understands that in life we do many times make these commitments to other people, and we make a decision where we are letting go of possibilities for greener grass on other sides of things to work with this person in this pasture. Really bad metaphor, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so you're bringing out in your partner, you bring out in them, it depends on how healthy their relationship is to Saturn, So it's either going to bring out in them the desire to commit to you and to become more serious, or it's going to bring out in them their fears, and then they're going to and they could run or do sabotage a relationship or that kind of thing. Okay, if your Saturn falls in your partner's 8th house, this is another kind of tricky one. The 8th house deals with very intense emotions and hidden emotions and jealousy, possessiveness, these manipulation, the things we do to avoid the death of something, the death of a relationship. It's like the part of us that wants to maintain control. If your Saturn falls into your partner's 8th house, you're going to bring these out in them, but it's in this way where your partner's going to feel like they can feel like they don't have control over their reactions, their instinctive reactions to the relationship. So they could feel feelings of jealousy or, et cetera, et cetera. But because your Saturn is there, it's like going to them. So then they feel shame and they feel bad. They feel guilty for feeling those strong, intense emotions. Okay. So this is not a really comfortable place for Saturn to be located. Saturn also, our 8th house is a house of sexuality. It's that house of the kind of sexuality where you are fully exposed. You put Saturn there, and there is a sense that person's vulnerability is could possibly be critiqued, judged, seen for all of its flaws. Okay, it would be very real. So there's no fantasy there. Okay, so they'll be seen just warts and all. So depending on how strong your partner is, if they're really strong, confident, and they're okay with being seen in that light, then this could be something where it's even a further deepening of their sort of self-awareness and their love of themselves. If you can stand naked in front of like the all-judging eye and be okay with it, then that's a strengthening experience. But if not, and you wither and the run from the relationship, if your partner runs from the relationship, then clearly that is what it is. But either way, it's a growth experience. Either way, you're gonna learn something from the Saturnian exchange relative to this house of death and rebirth and sexuality and intense emotion, intense dark feminine, like out of who knows where it comes from, emotion. Okay, so if you're the Saturn person, the planet person, just this is a tough one because this is almost one where the water house, they're so subconscious. It's almost like you don't really have direct control over it. It's just how you are. It's the part of you that's the grown up. It resonates on the same level, wavelength, whatever you want to call it, the vibration, as your partner's house of sexuality, their house of death, their scary. It's a scary house. It can be, So there's not really a whole lot you can do other than have conversations when they need to be had and be very open with one another. And you're going to have to try extra hard to help your partner feel safe when it comes to that relationship in that context, the sexual nature, the intimacy, the vulnerability, emotional moments where your partner could feel vulnerable and jealous or manipulative or act out in ways that are not, the most mature. Okay, you would need to sort of help them feel safe, create space for that. All right, Saturn in the 9th house. This is our house of philosophy and religion, wisdom, sort of big thinking. Saturn is going to help someone. I wouldn't be surprised if you're the Saturn planet if you actually brought organized religion or sort of helped someone. You might even actually be an atheist. You might bring that, but there's this element of you bringing into your partner's philosophical world some sort of a structured worldview. And Saturn stops things and it blocks things. So maybe even could be something where you're just not into that type of thing and it's landing in their house of philosophy, and maybe they are, and you're restricting that conversation, you're stopping that conversation from happening. It could be something where your partner, it can even be related to travel. Your partner might really love travel and might be someone who's an adventurer, and when your Saturn falls into that house, it's going to slow that down, restrict it, or organize it. Maybe you'd be the one that comes along and is like, oh, you're traveling. So what's your plans for next year, for 2016 for traveling? You love to travel so much. And you might be like the one that organizes the whole thing and helps them get rid of the dumb trips don't go there. Or the visits that are a waste of time, just depends. But overall, it's going to be this restricting and this bringing of grown-up quality to religion, something you're organizing the way that your partner thinks about philosophy, world religion, spirituality. And remember, philosophy is the study of the existential meaning of life. Why are we here? What's the big questions? It's the big why questions that we have. So, Saturn is on the low side, the low end, can kind of poo-poo people for whatever the thing is that house rules. So you just have to be sure that you are open to your partner's opinions as well when it comes to these areas of religion and spirituality and philosophy. And also, it's also, like I said, it's travel, and it is also higher education, college. So it's you may be someone on the high side that encourages your partner to take college or education or learning about these things more seriously. Your attitude towards these big questions could be such that your partner, there could be some depth to it, or some intensity, or some, there's this sort of decisiveness with Saturn. So maybe you have an opinion about these things, and it inspires your partner to then, through that kind of uncomfortable place of, oh, I'm not really sure what I think about these things, but okay, I'm going to kind of look into it, and so you could sort of begin a discussion in a sense. But you just have to be careful that you're not judging your partner for where they stand or don't stand. Maybe your partner's the atheist and you're religious, and so you've got to allow room for the other person to be wherever they're going to be on these topics. Saturn in your partner's 10th house. 10th house is the house of career, achievement, accomplishment. If your Saturn falls there, your partner may sense that their career, achievements, accomplishments are not quite up to snuff. Okay, and depending on how you exercise your Saturn, this could be done in a way that's positive, where they feel like they need to step it up. It could be like, I need to raise the bar. You've heard that saying when a man says, she makes me be a better man. She makes me be a better person, and that would be what would be happening here at this 10th house. And this would be as far as his career or her career goes. They would have this feeling that you knew they could do more. You knew they could be better than what they were, where they were currently operating, And it doesn't just have to be career. Remember, 10th house is status. We say achievement and accomplishment because it's how we're seen out in the world, how other people see us, see our outer life. And obviously through career, we can measure that through career. But you could have, let's say you're a stay-at-home mom, okay? That's your career. It's not as though you're out going to work every day where oodles of people are seeing what you're doing. You can kind of do what you want, but it's still your status. People still see you. They still see you as a stay-at-home mother. So that's your 10th house activity. If your partner's, let's say it's your partner, so I just kind of flip things around. So let's say your partner's Saturn, it falls into your 10th house. You may have a sense that you're not doing it well enough as a stay-at-home mom. Like you need to step up your game a little bit. And as you can imagine, that can be positive and it can be negative. It can be, on the one hand, it can feel, if your partner's kind about it, or they say, give helpful suggestions in a way that's framed kindly, it can feel like, okay, I can do better at whatever, getting the dishes done before I go to bed at night, or whatever, I don't know, reading to my kids every night, or whatever your personal challenge is with being a stay-at-home mother. This Saturn person can have this ability to sort of inspire you to be a better version of yourself. And then of course on the very low end, you could have a partner that's even almost abusive, like where verbally abusive to you, and you feel like your accomplishments are never good enough, or you have to work really hard for their approval, and you could feel like you were a failure. So I just flipped things all around. So if it's your Mars or your Saturn, don't make your partner feel like a failure. Encourage them and help them do better. It's almost like you don't even have to say anything with Saturn. It's almost just the way you are. They will know that you don't totally approve of where they're at and that they need to kind of step it up. And so many times it just works itself out naturally without even having to have a direct conversation. Like, you kind of suck at how you do your job, or, geez, why do you work at McDonald's? You should be, going back to school and trying to do some better stuff with your life. And you can definitely say that to somebody. You could have a conversation with someone where you say, you know what? You are working at McDonald's right now and you're getting paid $10 per hour, $12 per hour. And that's not the person I see you as. I see you as a 10th house. I see you as this incredibly creative person that could have your own business and be creating jewelry and selling that online, whatever. instead of making hamburgers. So you can do it in a way that's positive, but ultimately in the end, this person's still going to feel a sense that where they're at right now is not quite good enough. All right. So, and that can be good for growth, positive for growth, or it can be negative where it just hurts their self-esteem and they don't make any productive changes in their life. So, yeah. Saturn in the 11th house. 11th house is our house of friendship. It's also our house of hopes, ideals, and sort of dreams. It's the house of vision, your vision. So someone's Saturn here. Okay, let's talk about this as far as friendship goes. This can be one where you can, if it's your Saturn, your partner could feel like they have to do something to earn your friendship. There can be this sense that they'll feel like you believe in their ideals, but it's like they have to work really, really hard to actually get any of your time, or they have to work really, really hard to get your approval about sort of what their ideals and dreams and hopes and visions are. So, it can be positive, just kind of like the 10th house can be positive, because the Saturn person, the planet person, will have the ability to inspire that person to work really hard to reach for their dream. But there's also always this sense that it's not enough. And that's just this Platonic idea of form versus the formless. The idea in the head is perfect, and as soon as you try to make it real, it becomes imperfect. So there is kind of this quality in this type of a relationship where the person who's the house person just feels like they never are quite able to do things well enough for the friendship or for their ideals to be achieved. It's like, and then ultimately what can happen is the house person can just start to feel a sense of withdrawal or apathy towards the relationship. It's just kind of like, doesn't really matter. I put the effort in and I don't get back anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and go on my own way. So use it positively, help support their ambitions and hopes, or their dreams and their friendship, and cultivate that as best you can, rather than sort of making them work so hard for it. If your Saturn falls in your partner's 12th house, this is a little bit of a challenging placement. So I don't want to be like the bearer of bad news, but you got to remember the 12th house is your partner's unconscious. The 12th house is it's a part of them that they're not fully aware of. Remember we talked about like the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the part we see, that's our conscious mind, and everything else is the unconscious mind. It's like the majority, the bulk of who we are, is this vast, massive, unknown, sort of unknowable thing. Maybe it's not totally unknowable, but it seems like it. So when your Saturn falls there, you are going to bring out their fears, okay? And they don't know why they're afraid of you, but they are. There's a dis-ease there, unease with the way they feel emotionally around you sometimes. And especially when they feel vulnerable, they can feel quite exposed, kind of like the 8th house and kind of the 4th house as well. They can feel exposed. They can feel not fully accepted for their inner world that they themselves don't have control over. We don't have control over our unconscious. It just is. So if you're the Saturn person, remember let's say your Saturn is in, we'll say Leo again. Your Saturn's in Leo, and it falls into their Leo house. Saturn in Leo is dealing. You look at that Saturn, look at what it's dealing with. So Saturn in Leo is dealing with issues of the ego, and issues of like it's not okay to express the ego in a way that's undignified. Or issues of if we're too prideful or too proud, that there's something wrong with that. So if you naturally inherently have that as part of your psyche, okay, that will be projected onto the partner. So then when the partner has, let's say you go out to dinner and something, and you have a conversation about your partner. Oh, I got a great example. Let's say you go to dinner with friends and you're a woman, you have the Saturn in Leo. This is where my Saturn is. And let's say you go to dinner with friends and you're teasing your partner about his job. Okay, you're teasing him about what he does for a career, and you just are doing it, not really meaning anything by it, except for you actually do find his career kind of less than dignified. Okay, and your partner, you will bring out in them their own worries that they are doing something that's below their station. Okay, so this is, I'm speaking sort of to Leo. Depends on what's happening in your 12th house, and or their 12th house, and where your Saturn is. But just look at that planet, and look at what the fears might be. Not the planet. Look at that zodiac sign. Look at the fears for that zodiac sign, and then that will give you some clarity about what it is you are freaking this person out about, because that's what you're doing. You're freaking them out, and it's not comfortable. It does not feel good. So like I said with Leo is like this idea of the ego expressing itself in a way that's dignified and royal, and so you're bringing out this idea, and that your partner's going to feel like, the way that I am is not enough. It's not good enough. It's not bright and shiny enough, and I'm not enough. I'm not enough if it's Leo. So anyway, questions, if you have thoughts, that's the Saturn through the 12 houses. I'd love to hear your experiences. So let me know where your Saturn falls in your partners, and let me know if it sounds totally different than what I explained. Make a comment, because it's fun to hear. Okay, hope you have a good one, and it's Christmas week, so Merry Christmas for those of you who see this week, and later on down the road, there's always a Christmas. So Merry Christmas and Merry Unchristmas. Merry Unchristmas. Yes, Merry Unchristmas. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.